Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. With over 20 years of coaching experience, Clare Norman is highly sought after by other expert coaches, as well as successful coach training companies as a master mentor coach. Clare looks to continually sharpen individuals' coaching edge and upskill mentor coaches so they can deliver high-quality feedback to their coaches in development. Her laser focus on mindset shifts and her knack for spotting marginal gains has made her a go-to person for coaches looking for mentorship and practical, meaningful ways to improve their practice. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches show. This is Coach Mal, and today on the show, my special guest all the way from the New Forest of England. She's none other than Clare Norman. Please give your round of applause to her. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mel. Yes, and for the benefit of those who don't know, the New Forest is a national park, and we have ponies roaming wild. We have pigs roaming wild at this time of year to pick up the acorns that are poisonous to the ponies.
Oh, wow. We
have donkeys. They're all along the roads. So there are often pony jams. You can't be in a hurry when you live in the New Forest.
There you go. That's why it's probably called the New Forest, because the jams are with ponies. That's new. That's new for me.
Yeah.
Well, welcome once again, and thank you so much. It was, a couple of months, I would dare say, or perhaps more than a couple of months since the first time I met you. And we've been both busy with different things, and it's so nice to finally get to have a chat with you today.
Yes, and you too, Mel. I feel like we resonated when we first met, so this is going to be a great podcast.
Thank you. I believe so too. Love to know a little bit about Clare before we jump in about the work that you're doing, obviously, in the coaching realm.
Well, so it was 2001 that I started my coaching journey, and what hooked me into it was I was heading up our Leaders of All Levels strategy in the organization that I worked for, and I was noticing how people were having these aha moments in our training programs, but then they got back to work and they just went back to their old habits.
Yeah.
And so I was looking around for ways to transfer the learning out of the classroom and into the real world.
Yeah.
And coaching was one of the things that I stumbled across back then. And so that's when it all began. That's when the love affair with coaching began. So I was inside the organization at the time. I was coaching off to the side of my job for about 14 years internally. So I have that background, an internal coach, before I then became an external coach about nearly 10 years ago. No, is that right? 9 years ago. I've lost track. 9 years.
It's all right. We often do lose track, especially when things are going so well.
Yeah.
Congratulations. 14 years inside the company, having a different mindset, obviously, from before coaching and after, when you got coached yourself and being exposed to coaching, rather. And just being able to lead that bit, right? Having that experience of creating perhaps some sort of coaching culture in the organization. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was hard work because the organization wasn't really ready for it. It was quite a command and control kind of organization, paternalistic.
Yeah.
And it had a long way to go. So it was a slow pushing water uphill kind of journey to continue to change the mindset of the leaders within the organization. One thing I did find was that the younger leaders were really craving for more of using more of a coach approach with the people that they led. And so they were definitely on board. So I wrote a blog for many, many years internally. And at one point, my people page, which was the equivalent of my, LinkedIn profile, my internal LinkedIn profile, like I had more hits on my profile than our CEO did, because people were desperate to learn more about how do I use more of a coach approach. I mean, they weren't coaching, but they were using more of a coach approach with the people that they were working with to try and harness the engagement, harness the motivation, and draw out the best in their people. So I am really proud of that. Albeit when I was thick in it, it felt like the slowest culture change ever. But just as I was leaving, the organization set up a coaching function.
Wow.
So I knew at that point, oh, great, there are, the organization has properly bought into this now if they are willing to fund an internal coaching organization. So.
There you go. You heard it on this show, right? Sometimes in some companies, it takes 13, 14 years of hard work, pushing water up the hill before something happens. And it's just so amazing. To me, that sounded like a testament of the hard work that you've put through the years, Claire. And to a point, I mean, it is. And then to a point when things were changing and obviously people were shifting, new managers, new younger people were coming into the organizations and a little bit more open in their mindsets. And that's when things kind of worked together, right? And came together, right? So
I definitely think that's where I learned to be patient and persistent, which has served me well as an external coach, selling my services. Patience and persistence go such a long way.
Yeah, definitely. What made you take the jump from that 14 years, building that internally and then saying, now it's time for me to get on my own horse and ride into my own journey ahead?
Well, it's a really funny story because when I first got the job at that organization, which was some years before even the coaching started, apparently the reason I got the job was because I knew, or I was very clear about what I was going to be doing within 3 to 5 years, and I was going to be running my own company. So they gave me a job, even though I said, in 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be running my own company.
Okay.
Then I said that, and the person who recruited me, every time he ran into me in the corridor, he said, "Oh, you're still here then? You're not running your own company yet?" So we used to have a good laugh about that. Because actually, I'm fairly risk averse, as it turns out. And so I didn't want to take that jump. And it just felt safer. I had a salary, I had good, all the stuff that you have that goes along with an employed role. And even in the times when I was a bit, or more than a bit, fed up or ready for a change, I didn't quite have the courage to go for it. So it actually took me being pushed out. So my job was made redundant. And even at that point, it didn't twig with me, or maybe it did, but I didn't have the courage to immediately say, right, this is it, I'm setting up my own company. Took me about 6 months to recognize that the jobs that I was applying for were things that I had done 10 years ago. The organizations, well, I had some feedback from one of the recruiters to say, Claire, you're just too innovative. These companies can't, they can't handle somebody as innovative as you. And I don't say this boast, but the organization I worked in was incredibly innovative, and that was the expectation of us. And so I couldn't see myself going back into an organization where I would have to do all the stuff that I had, it wouldn't have been a stretch for me. So it was at that point that the penny dropped that said, well, if you want to be innovative, then you're going to have to set up your own company so that you can innovate in the way that you want to. And so that's what I did. About 4 months after I left the organization, I set up my company in January 2015.
Oh, well done, well done. And it's always a great, bold move that, each of us have in our journey. And what mine was, if I remember, 2010, when I told the family, that time I was living in Melbourne, and I still am right now, but I said, let's go back to Malaysia. And they're like, what? What's this about? Right? And we did. That was like the push, right? If we didn't probably go back to Malaysia at a point of time, I don't know whether I would have jumped into coaching. I was an internal coach for a couple of years, just like you. Yeah, it took a bit of courage, to say the least. And I guess for you, right? And then what happened? After that, setting it up, what was the couple of ideas that you had to kind of kick off your organization?
Well, I think I was networking in the wrong places. So this is a real learning for me that I share with other people, is figure out where people hang out, who are your buyers. And so it took me quite a long time of a bit of trial and error of going to networking events and realizing my buyers are not here. So I needed to figure that out. Now that I sell more to coaches than to organizations, that I know exactly where coaches hang out. That's really easy to find coaches. And I still don't know that I've particularly figured out where leaders hang out or where the buyers of coaching for corporates hang out. But luckily, I'm at a point now, so many years in, that I get referrals and word of mouth. So I don't have to go networking in the same way. But one of the things that I innovated on was the mentor coaching lock-in that I still facilitate today. And that idea kind of came out of a couple of things. One, I wanted to be mentor coaching, and I wanted to be doing group mentor coaching, and I had been doing group mentor coaching as an associate for another organization. But also in conversation with a friend and colleague, she was running something around supervision that was kind of retreat-like. And so I took some of her ideas and the way she had structured it, and I made it into this lock-in. And the reason it's called a lock-in, well, people in the UK would know a lock-in as being locked into a pub after hours. It's not, there's no alcohol involved in my lock-ins. But you know how people procrastinate so much on the paperwork, the admin side of getting their credential. And so I wanted to bring together both the mentor coaching piece, but also time for people to get their paperwork done in a supportive, nurturing environment, retreat-like. So that was one of the first innovations that I created, was mentor coaching lock-in, where people can have the mentor coaching and they have the time to really break the back of that paperwork, which stops so many people from going for credentialing.
Yeah, that's innovative, because I didn't get to do my paperwork. I took a different route. I kind of asked my spouse. and say, would you like to help me, darling? Be really nice. I'm busy doing the coaching. Could you help me with the Excel sheet?
So lucky.
Yeah, she had access to my diary for years, right? It just went back on. And I said, you could go into the diary and just pull things out. You like to problem solve, don't you? This is a problem you can solve. There you go. Isn't that
Brilliant.
innovative?
If she's detail orientated, that's a good way to use her strengths.
Absolutely, right? That's what we're
Yeah,
trained to do. Identify strengths, work with them, right?
there we go.
But I love the idea of the lock-in because you're right. There's this thing called procrastination, and whatever we have, it's scapegoat, whatever we call it, right? We kind of blame everyone and everything around us, and we don't get things done, even as a coach.
Even as a coach, yes, you would think that we would know how to get over that procrastination monkey, but
no, we're just normal human beings. There's nothing
we are,
special about us.
we are
Right?
human beings. Exactly.
Well, one of the things I really love about your language, and I'll be talking about your book really soon, but the language that comes out of the book is how you describe the coachees as
Yeah.
thinkers, right?
Yes.
So I would like to explore that for a bit, right? Obviously I've heard that before, but for those who are hearing it for the first time, Claire has a special way of describing the thinker, right? And I would just love to hear where that came about, when you address our wonderful coaches as thinkers.
This came from Nancy Klein's work. She talks about thinkers in the thinking environment. So I can't take credit for it. It is all Nancy's. But I feel like if we call them the client, we're setting up this consumer mentality. They become the consumer. They're buying a service. It's it becomes a service orientation. And you'll notice in the markers that we talk a lot about partnership. And so
that's right.
If we are partnering, that's very different from providing a service where there's a very different kind of power dynamic. So it's really important that we don't, I think it's important that we don't set up that power dynamic. The other word that some people use to describe them is the coachee, and that's quite diminutive. So it makes them out to be small. And we definitely don't want them to be small either, because again, we then have this power dynamic, we have this size difference between me and them.
True.
And so I've chosen to use the thinker. I still don't think it's the perfect word, because thinking involves the brain. It's very cerebral.
Yeah.
It's the intellectual. That's what we think about when we think about thinking, is using the brain. And yet in coaching, we have so much wisdom in our bodies, in our feelings, in our emotions, in our other senses.
Yes.
And so ideally, I wish I could come up with another term like thinker, but that captured all of the wisdom that is in that person. Wisdom maker. I don't know, that just sounds too much like a wizard, though. They think I would go to the army and call them a wisdom maker. But a sense maker, that's the person we most need to entice out of them. The sense making. That's what they're there for, is to make sense of their own life, their own needs, their own choices. And so maybe sense maker is an even better term for them, other than thinker. My sense making is always evolving. So maybe in the next book I might call them the sense maker or something else.
Well, my version of that is a couple of them. One of the thought is, that's the reason why my organization is called Catalyst, right? Because in a sense, they are the catalyst of their own lives, right? That's one side of it. And then when you're talking about the sense, I have this quote that says that people are meaning-making machines. I call them triple M's, because that's what we do every single moment. We're attaching meaning to everything, every story, every person, everything, every experience. We're just attaching those meanings. And of course, those meanings come with thoughts and emotions and all of that. It could be a mix of that sense and that meaning making. That's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much, Claire, for sending me your book.
Welcome.
This is Claire's book. If you can see it here, The Transformational Coach. It is a must-get book for every coach out there. Don't worry, I don't get any proceeds by saying that. And again, I don't often say things about books out there, but this is a book that I believe, go into deeper and deeper every time I may be, stuck with one sort of a thinking stop. You broke this book out into that 7 areas of 7 different mindsets that we have to move away from and go towards this. So the first one is the mindset we learn as parents or from our parents. The mindset at school, the mindset from our peers, mindset at work, mindsets we learn from managers, mindsets from our own coach training, and finally the mindsets we learn from our coaching experience, right? And what we need to discard to kind of get into that masterful coaching. So many nuggets that I've been, already getting from just going through it in a speed read, because I do speed read, by the way. Even that, I've been highlighting this book like forever, right? So well done.
And it really means a lot that even a master coach such as yourself is still learning from, learning from whatever is in front of you, but that there's something in this book for everybody, every coach, no matter which stage of their journey they're at. And in fact, sometimes we have been coaching for so long that we actually don't realize what mindsets we have taken on and embedded within ourselves, which are perhaps not the most useful mindsets to have, because mindset, of course, informs skill set. And so it's one thing to focus on brushing up our skill sets, but if we still hold on to the old unhelpful mindset, then we'll end up slipping back to the old unhelpful skill set as well. So that's why starting with mindset is so crucial, and recognizing some of these mindsets that have been hidden for years, hidden in plain sight, maybe, but things that we have learned on our journey of life, which were useful at the time and they were well-meaning, but they're not so useful in our coaching world for the thinkers themselves.
Absolutely. I would love to go to the place where this was birthed. I'm sure you've got that reason why you compiled this together. I know there are interviews as well from the wisdom of about 20 plus coaches.
Yeah.
Of course, your own thoughts into this as well. So tell us how that journey started for this book.
So I said earlier that the book that came before this one, Mentor Coaching, A Practical Guide, was all about mentor coaching, obviously, as it says in the tin. And as a result of all of the mentor coaching that I had done, observing other coaches as they were coaching and giving them feedback, I was noticing so many of these mindsets that were getting in people's way. So it was those things that were stopping people from being the best coach they could be, or from embracing a particular PCC marker, let's say. There was stuff stopping them from displaying those competencies that the ICF is looking for. And so I found that in mentor coaching, more and more I was helping people to identify the mindset shifts that they needed to make in order to make the skill set shift. And so that's where this book really came from, was just noticing all of this stuff behind the skills, and realizing that we've got to get this out there, because it's not enough to focus on the competencies. The competencies are great, don't get me wrong. But if a coach hasn't worked on their mindsets first, then they're not going to be able to consistently display those competencies. They might end up displaying them for the purposes of a recording that they submit, but then after that, they'll be like, oh, well, I can go back to my old way of doing it. No, that's not the point. The point is to change for good. And so therefore the mindsets need to shift first. So that's where it came from, was all of the observation that I was doing in mentor coaching, and really starting to see these glimmers of, oh, that's interesting. What is it that is causing you to take that route rather than this route?
And you know, when you're saying that, it made me think about the people I've worked with as well. So I also work with coaches through the school. And I noticed that, similar to what you have noticed, I just probably didn't write a book on that one. And you did. So that's fantastic, right? They bring everything of themselves in it. And as much as we say, bring yourself into the coaching session, right? Appear as that unique self of yours, right? You don't need to appear as this made up self of yours, if you know what I mean, right? It's one of that. I got that from here as well, similar. But if we bring too much of that mindset, right, that we've been conditioned by, where maybe in school or in a previous workplace, we've looked at a manager who perhaps had good relationship with us, and that's why we adopt certain things, right? Because it worked in that environment, it worked for that particular situation, and maybe it could work in this as well. And so we bring things along our journey, right? And then it suddenly appears in what we're doing, right? Even through our coaching. So I totally resonate with that, because I've seen that happen, and how this needs to be, I wouldn't say addressed, but needs to be taken into consideration, into that awareness, into often say into our peripherals, so that we like, it's coming up,
It's something about becoming much more conscious to those mindsets and questioning them and thinking, is this serving, is this of benefit to the person that I'm working with? Or how could it be of even more benefit if I were to shift to a different belief or mindset, which would then shift the skill sets that follow. So making those mindsets much more conscious, you know, bringing them out into the open and questioning them, looking at them and thinking, I hadn't realized that this had become part of who I am. I'm just going to question it. And it might be that in the questioning it, we say, yes, that's absolutely the best mindset in this situation. But equally, there were 83 mindset shifts in that book. So there are a lot of things that we may have just instilled in ourselves, or not we have, but through the messages that we've heard from parents and teachers and managers and coach training, that have, you know, subliminally sunk in, and we need to make them whatever the opposite of subliminal is, make them more obvious to ourselves so that we question them.
Sometimes we don't question them because we believe it works, right? Or we've been told so many times that this is the way. It's just like in organizations that I've been in and you've been in, and organizations that we're probably working with in partnership, they have a certain culture already.
Yeah.
And it's not about just throwing it out, baby and bathwater together. It's not about that, because some things are working for that particular organization. So the culture is not particularly broken. It's just that there are tweaks and shifts that needs to be made in different aspects of it. Like, for example, in the area of communication or open communication, right? The area of, am I able to allow my voice to come out?
Yeah.
And of course, in those important areas like diversity and inclusivity these days, right? So all of that is coming together, meeting with the new needs of people. That's what makes this a beautiful meeting place.
Yeah.
And obviously with that, there'll be a lot of friction happening, because there are different schools of thoughts and concepts of what worked, what used to work, what can potentially be better at helping us grow as a company, and so on and so forth. In your experience, Claire, when you've got this meeting place of all this differences, what will be some of the initial levers stepping in to kind of say, hey, we can't go about changing everything. Maybe there's a couple of things we can look at first within the organization and culture?
Yeah, well, it's a long time since I've worked inside an organization for, culture change wise.
Yes.
But what I see from the outside as a coach is how there are some organizational cultures where the system is really stopping the individuals with whom I work from doing their best work. And so those individuals can't see any way that they can make changes. The system has kind of crowded in on them, and so they're like, well, I can't do anything, there's nothing I can do. So more and more often I'm encountering people in organizations who are feeling this sense of I can't, there's nothing I can do. And I find that really, really tough to be in partnership with those individuals. And so there's something about, and by the way, this came out of a supervision session that I had a few weeks ago, because I was starting to feel that sense of helplessness and hopelessness as well as the coach. Wow. I was catching it. And this is why supervision is so very important for us as coaches. But there's something about us moving away from coaching being seen as the thing that can create big changes for an individual. And sometimes it can, but actually it's not all about that massive change. It's also, and in these circumstances, about helping people to see, to find the glimmers of light. What are the small things that they have control over? What are the what's the one first step that they could be taking? So rather than it being, right, I'm going to conquer the world, it's what can I do in my sphere of influence? What can they do in their sphere of influence? And helping them to recapture that sense of agency, which, they wouldn't have got to where they are today without that agency. But they've, been worn down. And so our job as coaches, I think in those circumstances, is to enable them to refine those glimmers of hope for themselves, and little by little be making the impact that they can make in that organization.
Thank you. There's obviously no one answer, one solution for this, right? So what you shared is it's just beautiful, because the leader in particular has influence, and sometimes along the way they have just lost the zeal or the zest for it.
Yeah.
And through that, allowing them the space to think through that, to have that new shift within themselves first, whatever that is, can help them with that one thing, that one step that is within their influence, and they know it is part of what they can catalyze forward.
Yes. There's that catalyst word again.
There you go. And you know, when I was reading, the chapter, you have different shifts. So you have 83 of them. It kind of showed me that coaching is very counterintuitive to the things that we're so used to, right? It's like, that's one way. We're not often saying this is the wrong way and this is now the right way, but that's one way that we've been accepting as one set of truth. And perhaps there is another way, right? And that's what this is all about, right? And I guess through the years, I've realized that coaching in an organization setting, that's even in the culture, sometimes it's a counterintuitive way of doing things, of being, of empowering, of whatever it is. It's often the reverse of what we're so used to in our systems.
Yes, yes. Because for so long we've been ingrained in a different kind of culture, and it takes a long time to
Absolutely.
start to see, oh, maybe that isn't the best way. Maybe there are other ways, and to take other people along with us as well.
Yeah. Claire, if there's a wish that I'm not the genie, don't worry. If there's a wish that you can wish for coaching for its future, what would that wish be?
Oh, you sprung that one on me. um my wish would be for more reflective practice to be integrated into the way that we are. So reflective practice in terms of mental coaching and supervision. And of course, I would say that because those are two of the things that I offer. So I am biased, I recognize that. But also the slowing down to think about these things that have become so integral to who we are and how we live our lives, and so not rushing on to the next thing on our to-do list and the next thing on, and I say this as much for myself to hear as well as for other coaches.
Same.
But the real necessity for us as coaches to ponder about this craft of ours. I mean, I think there is some science to it, but I think it is more of a craft, an art. And so when something is an art, there's a uniqueness in the way I show up compared to the way you show up, compared to the way somebody else shows up. So who is it that I wish to be as a coach? Who do I wish to be for the world? So not just asking these questions when we take a break and go off on holiday, and perhaps we're lying on a sunbed or walking up a mountain or whatever, and we have time to process these things, but somehow integrating this into our habits, our daily habits, so that we have that time to reflect on who we are, because who we are is how we coach.
Thank you. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
Any last thoughts as we come to the close of this session with each other? Thank you so much once again for your time and
Well, thank you, and thank you
thoughts.
for inviting me, and thank you for the stimulating questions. There's certainly some things percolating in my head now that I want to go away and write about. I'm always writing, and I'm always on the lookout for there's something I can write about. I suppose, therefore, what I would say to anybody who's listening, if we are not already connected on LinkedIn, I would love to have people connect with me there. Please tell me that this is where we met, in inverted commas, because that helps me to have some context as to maybe what was useful about this podcast. But yes, that would be my final words. I love to connect with coaches.
Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your sharing, for your insights, and of course, for the book, The Transformational Coach. It's a gift to the world, and not just for coaches, but to the world, to kind of show them the beauty of the counterintuitive ways that we can live and be as a human being as well. So thank you once again, Claire, for being on the show.
Thank you, Mel. Take care, everyone.
This has been the 100 Master Coaches show today with Claire and myself, Mel, saying take care wherever you are, stay safe, and continue to coach out there. Take care. Bye for now.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.